Welcome to the Landco podcast, where we aim to bring value to landowners and prospective land buyers through our experiences and network. I'm your host and managing partner of Landco, John O'Reilly. All right, guys, welcome back to the last episode of the year-round Whitetail Hunter. So if you haven't listened to the previous episodes, we kind of followed along with Matt and Ryan January through the beginning of the season on what they were doing in preparation for the upcoming season. So now we are here, going to just kind of have an informal chat about kind of bringing us up to speed on what they did and how it worked and how the season went. That's it. So I think we got through through September, right?
I think did we get through September, October?
I think you went through October because I was in harvest. I didn't make it. The last one you guys did.
Okay.
Sounds right.
So I don't think we talked about any of the season, did we? That's hunting season.
No, I think actually when we touched on October, I may have been chasing one of those deer but hadn't caught up with it quite yet.
Well, let's start there. So October, Ryan, you can start. What did you do, food plots throughout the year that worked in October, and maybe more importantly, how do you approach hunting in October? Because it's probably different than November or December.
I only hunt usually the first week to 10 days, and it's typically on greens, which is alfalfa or your whitetail clovers or brassicas, things like that. And then after that, I'm usually tied up with harvest. So I hunted probably about the first 10 days and then did not hunt until right around Halloween. That's about all I got in October.
Okay. Any movement, any good hunting in October?
I saw a lot of really good 3-year-old deer. Saw one 5-year-old deer that ended up disappearing later in the season, and he hasn't come back. But a lot of young bucks, a lot of good up and comers, because at that time they're not pressured.
Yeah,
they're coming out in the green fields, and you're able to do, identify a lot of them that you've seen on camera.
Sure.
But I did not shoot anything in October.
Right. Was there one that you're after, or do you treat that more like a kind of a scouting, keep your distance? And
I was not at that point in time. I had not identified anything even on camera that I was going to go after.
Okay.
So,
how about you?
October was good. Like Ryan, I mean, I probably hunted the first week to 10 days of October going after one, and then I didn't make it back out until, I think the 26th, 27th.
It got hot too, right? Was October hot? I know those.
There was a couple of fronts that rolled through.
There was some cool times.
Okay, you know what? Yeah. I'm thinking November and we'll get to that in a minute for duck season. It got hot.
Yeah, and I mean, I had one buck that I was targeting pretty hard. There was another one that I was hoping would show up that, I didn't have a whole lot of pictures of him, but just hoping he would, make an appearance. I did have an encounter with the one that I was targeting. Came to about 45 yards, but it was just way too thick. If I would have sat the place I was originally thinking up on the field edge, I probably could have got him. But, it was a morning hunt. I kind of wanted to be more inside the timber where I thought he'd be, cruising for does, but he was locked on a doe actually. So couldn't pull him off her and never got a shot opportunity.
So are you on greens as well?
I am in October. Typically for most of October, even going into Halloween and early rut, I like to be on green fields, and I feel like that's where the does are focusing their attention. The bucks, especially early October, still seem to be hitting the green fields pretty regularly.
Okay, so that all worked. All the plots that you did, spring through fall, all that green stuff seemed to work pretty good. And you were on. What were you guys planting?
I planted have a lot of radishes, turnips that had some brassicas mixed in with it, some rape. Trying to think what else was in those.
Didn't you have a different mix that you planted?
You had one that
we work. I've got a buddy who owns Horny Buck Seed Company. He's got a lot of different mixes that have worked really well for us over the years. So we went with that, and the greenfields did exactly what they were supposed to, as they do every year. It's more of if you're out there on the right day, I think,
right.
If you can take advantage of opportunities that are given to you.
Okay. Do you approach, again, I'm kind of asking this because I remember this being the case when I used to pay more attention to Ryan hunting, but like in October, are you trying? You don't want to pressure anything too much at that point, right? So are you going full bore after deer that you want, or are you kind of like
Usually not
edging
till,
in to make sure you don't screw it up for when that
yeah,
deer
I'm
goes?
I'm really not going full bore crazy after a deer really hard until after Halloween or right around Halloween's when I get pretty serious about invading the areas I haven't gone into.
Yeah, I won't, I don't know what the number is, but there's a number of stands I don't even hunt until
Right.
the 4th or 5th of November.
Right.
Okay.
And I don't hunt mornings at all in the first part of October.
Right.
One thing that will trump that, though, sometimes is the moon. And if the moon is right, which this year it was, the first 4 to 6 days, I think, of October, the moon was good for morning
Right.
hunting, and I did not morning hunt, though. I typically won't morning hunt until the end of October. That last week around Halloween is when I'll start morning hunting.
Okay. Okay. So then we're through October to November, and I didn't even like throw a teaser out there that both of these guys shot giant deer, but you shot yours. Would you say mid-November?
November 13th.
November 13th, and you were early December.
December 3rd.
Okay. So let's roll into November. What changes? I mean, obviously the deer movement changed, but how does your hunting change? And how does, at that point, are they migrating from greens to something else? What happens in November that you guys do differently?
One is, I concentrate a lot more on mornings, and I'm also concentrating on more hours in the stand where, I don't know how many times this year I hunted all day. I mean, never.
I remember that.
I'd go in the morning and not come out until dark. And the deer I shot at 11:30 or 11:30 in the morning.
Oh, really? I don't think I
So,
knew that. Crazy.
So that's one thing. The other thing was, this year I noticed the probably the 2 and 3-year-old bucks were really bumping does around earlier in my experience than in the past. I didn't remember them. I mean, it was around the 10th or 12th of October. October we had 2 full moons in the same month, and I'm sure that had something to do with it. But I remember there was a lot of activity in the fields where the bucks were bumping, when not full blown chasing, but they
Right.
were messing with the does. It seemed like early this year for me, and so I would always in November. Obviously I'll hunt close to bedding areas where the does are because the does were getting harassed so bad that there was a time where I may only see a few does in a day sit, but I see a lot of bucks
Right.
because the bucks were looking for them, and the does were sitting so tight
Locked
to
down.
cover because they were being harassed so bad that they wouldn't move.
Okay. So November, you're on bedding.
I'm in the middle of the timber. I'm going to my number 1 sets.
Okay. Similar to you, right?
Exactly. And, it's unfortunate that I like the rut because you're going to see a lot of activity. But the thing I don't like hunting with the rut is the unpredictability, I think, of it is these deer that you have patterned so well and you kind of know where they're going to be at this point in the year. They may not be. They're most likely. In fact, I'm sitting in a place where I've seen them before, and I check my cameras later. They're on the complete opposite side of the farm.
Yeah. Or 3 miles down the road.
Exactly.
I know of a couple guys that I talk to regularly that want to know, get their opinions on different scenarios and things like that. And a couple of them told me about deer that they had here, and they were 3 miles down the road.
Right.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And they, would probably make their ways back. I don't know if they ever did or not, but
Right.
it's there's a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a fair amount of luck involved during the rut. Right place, right time.
Absolutely.
Yep. So walk us through when you shot yours. Were you hunting? Like, were you after that deer?
I was after that deer. I'd seen that deer 2 weeks prior and had him at between 60 and 70 yards and watched him for probably close to an hour.
Okay.
Off and on, he'd come back in, and I never knew this, but he had to have had a doe in that thicket, and he kept coming in and out, and I knew he was going to be my target deer then. And so I basically just was going to hunt him the rest of the year, and ended up about 2 weeks after I had seen him, which would have been, right around Halloween, because I shot him on the 13th, so it would have been right around Halloween. And I shot him on the 13th, late morning on the 13th.
Okay, so walk us through that hunt. Were you hunting bedding then as well?
Transition between bedding, two different bedding areas, and it was in a drainage, a big creek bottom basically, and there was bedding on both sides. And I slipped in there about an hour before daylight and just saw buck after buck after buck all morning. I'm like, I'm not getting out of here. And I had passed a mid 150s buck right at first light that I knew.
Yeah.
And then, like always, I was about ready to get down, and I saw him about 150 yards up that ditch, and he was coming my way. So
Nice. Following a doe or just kind of cruising?
no, he was looking for one.
Okay. So I was hoping we'd have their racks here, but we don't. So I'll show some pictures of them on the video. But walk us through, what was he? He was an older deer, right? Five and a half?
He was either 5.5 or 6.5. I haven't had his teeth aged yet, but he was either 5.5 or 6.5. I know that. And he was a mainframe 10 with a kicker off of one of the brow tines, and just a great solid deer. Wasn't a super high scoring deer, but he was a good mature deer.
Right.
He had taped out at like 164 and some change, something like that. So I kind of misjudged him. I thought he was going to go 170.
Right.
He's got a great frame.
Great frame.
Yeah.
And just his main beams were a little short, but I mean, who's going to complain about a 164?
Right.
You know?
For sure. You did not get the deer you're after in November. Is that the same deer you ended up shooting in December? Or is that a different
No,
one?
actually, the one that I was going after October in through first shotgun season ended up he got shot probably about 50 yards off our property line by the neighbor first day of first shotgun season. And that's fine. The one that I was hoping to see all season long actually started popping up pretty regularly after first shotgun season. And we left that farm. We don't pressure that farm too much. And so to see him show up, I was kind of actually relieved, because then I knew I could kind of focus my efforts on him for the remainder of the season.
So what changes from November to December? Again, in terms of all of it. Food, where you're hunting, how you hunt.
Yeah, there was at that point, once the rut is kind of goes into a little bit of a break, they've been chasing for a while and breeding. I kind of, focus on what the cameras are doing. I like to see where, the bucks have been moving. I think they like to get back on greens, pretty quick after they've been with does and replenish some lost nutrients. They've lost a lot of weight from all the chasing they've done.
And we didn't have the weather.
No.
We didn't have the weather to force them to any grain.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about
earlier. It was not
earlier.
super cold. And
most of November was, I remember it for duck season, 0 wind, mid-40s.
Yeah, honestly, with the weather that we had all season, I didn't hunt grain until towards the last part of the season.
Right.
But yeah, I ended up shooting mine on December 3rd, and I actually ended up shooting him on a different farm than the buck I'd been chasing forever, purely because my number one target had gone nocturnal. His only movement was midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. So I just decided to not pressure that farm, leave it alone, and go to another one. Ironically enough, the day that I shot my buck, my number one target was walking in the daylight on the farm. But it's
But you knew that deer, the farm that you went to, the deer that you shot, you knew he was there.
I did. We'd had pictures of him about a week prior in the daylight, and actually a day or two before we shot him, he was, in that area. We knew he was there, cruising around. So I knew I'd have a good chance of seeing him. It was just whether or not he'd be in range.
Right. So walk us through the hunt, December 2nd.
Third. Yeah, I got out there. Sat in a blind over a big ag field. This is a farm that I typically will bow hunt during the rut when I can call them in from a distance. During gun season, I sit in the blind overlooking everything. I'd seen a lot of does, which is pretty typical out there. They were all moving away from where I was at, though. And then I'd say an hour before last light, he popped out 175 yards away maybe, and I thought he was going to cruise over and go join those does over there, but he went the exact opposite way and moved towards me when I've been having pictures of him. and didn't have to. I mean, no calling, just kind of waited patiently for him to work his way there slowly, and he gave me a pretty decent.
And that was over a grain plot as well.
Grain. That was on a bean field.
Okay.
Cut bean field or standing?
Cut bean field. And typically, I mean, it wasn't super cold. I typically wouldn't hunt that kind of field, but just knowing there's no pressure on this farm whatsoever. There is food in there. It's the biggest food source in the area. I knew there were going to be deer in there.
Okay.
I always see big deer there. It's just a question of if they're going to be, in range.
Yep. So tell us a little. Again, I'll show a picture on the video, but tell us about the deer a little bit.
Yeah, had a couple years of pictures of him. Had an encounter with him last year, and just a little bit too far away. Didn't happen. He this year was a mainframe 7-pointer with some extras. I think as a 7 he taped out right around 150. With his extras, he was, I think, just shy of 160, like 159 and change.
So you were after him last year. So he's an older deer. What, 6.5?
With what he has, I think he's at least 5.5. I was leaning more towards 6.5 because he was a 8-pointer last year, and this year he was just a clean 7.
Okay.
But I mean, he's a very big frame deer. He's got really good mass on him. He's very, he was about 21 and change wide, I want to say. Great bases. Solid deer. I mean, I was thrilled to see that deer. Yeah.
I like those older deer with character like that.
I mean, I knew when I had him on camera the day before we've got camera set to video, when I saw him walking around, I mean, he's a bruiser. He's got a big body on him.
Okay, so you got both your deer. Moving into late December, the remainder of the season in January. I know you guys didn't shoot any more deer, but in general, both of you liked hunting that time of year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what changes?
Probably my favorite time of the year, to be honest.
So what changes?
A lot less guys in the woods, and the deer. You're not hunting mornings anymore. At least I don't.
Yeah.
They're bedding closer to your food source, and I saw a lot of deer. I mean, there was times where I think the most I saw in one sit was 44 or 45 deer.
Because at this point they're hitting grains because they're
coming out. Especially if you could hunt ahead of a front, and then that's always good. And then let the front come through, and then as soon as you get a south wind after that front, they will just start pouring out. And that was my best number hunt. I did not see for me personally, I did not see a shooter buck all late season. I saw a lot of good deer, a lot of great, 3-year-olds and some up and comers. I did not see a good mature deer for whatever reason this year.
In years past, you usually do that, right? That's when you always
Yeah.
Same story for you.
Yeah, I mean, like Ryan, I love late season because you see so many deer. The one thing I don't like about late season is these deer have been hunted all season long. They're definitely skittish. A little more skittish than they ever are before in the season.
I thought you were going to say it's freezing cold outside.
Oh, no.
It was we never really had those type of temperatures.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember one morning, during the rut, I think it got down into like the mid-20s.
Right.
Or low 20s was like the coldest it got during the rut. In late season, I mean, it was always highs 28, 32.
Yep.
I think Christmas Eve was about the coldest day that rolled through.
I mean, to us that feels pretty chilly. To the whitetail deer, I think that's what they like.
Yeah.
I don't think that forces them to move that much.
Right.
But at that point, they're still hitting.
They're still need to eat.
Yeah. Okay.
My late season, I took every opportunity I could to hunt late season just because my target that I chased all season long, my big one, was moving daylight pretty regularly. It was just a cat and mouse game. Unfortunately, I mean, I'd get a picture of him pretty regularly in the same spot 3 days in a row. I'd get out there to hunt the next day, same conditions, and for no reason whatsoever, he's in the field right next to me. I'd sit, it's just one thing. It's like you think he's going to go here based on everything. He's somewhere else. And something you talked about with early movement in October with the bucks bumping, I saw more late season, like almost looked like rut activity than I probably ever have before. I saw bucks literally, fast as they can, sprinting after does in the last week and a half of the season, which was I've not
mature deer, or the same kind of 2.5.
I mean, I saw a 3.5 and a 4.5-year-old, both of them on the tail of a doe in January, chasing after her, which was pretty crazy. And even my big one, I thought I had him, was going to sit in the right spot, and I got pictures of him that day following a doe to a different area, and ended up
crazy.
Kind of threw my plans off for the night. But,
yep.
Yeah. I ended up the last sit of the season, the last final sit, right? 60 yards. He came in with his bachelor group, looked down at the field, looked like they were going to make their move, kept going. They took a path that the bucks normally do, where they circle back around and come in, but never made it.
Didn't happen for you.
Did not happen.
That's part of it. Okay. Well, what do you? How do you take all this stuff that happened this season into next season? I mean, is it more of the same, or do you take what you learned about some of these deer? And you've been on the same farms long enough that you kind of probably know it. But
you also you take in the inventory off your cameras. I'm going to run cameras through February, so I know when they start shedding.
Yeah.
So I can start finding horns, and then you look at what made it off your camera based on your cameras, and then you kind of have an idea of what you're going to have coming next year.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got some, again, every year I've got stands that need to be tweaked. The new ones that I put up for this year, every one of them needs to be tweaked.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe moving one 100 yards over here, and I've got one, I only have to move it one tree over. It's just the angle is not right to get the right shot. So.
Well, what about if you're, and I know Fairview's not a new farm for you so much anymore, but for a while it was. I mean, so do you take inventory on how the food did and change it for next year? I mean, I know that did you guys do beans that first year?
We did.
Whatever it was. I remember you guys being like, it's not big enough to do beans anymore. Like, do you ever take inventory of a new farm and regroup the next year and either change it back to greens or say, you know what, we need to plant more food or whatever it is.
Right.
I know we had that talk about the farm we planted in Knox for those guys. Right. They just didn't have enough food. So is that sort of some of the stuff that goes through your head, or you kind of have those dialed in?
It does for sure. And I still almost think the farms that we've been planting greens pretty regularly, I still think that almost needs to stay consistent because of the deer density out there. I still worry about planting beans in any of those fields that there wouldn't be any food, come late season for them.
Yep.
Yeah. Unless we did, fenced them in or something like that.
I've still got plenty of beans left. I still have tons of corn left. They're not hitting it.
So will you scale back next year? Is that just because it was kind of warm?
I think it was just the way the year was, and they're the size. Those grain plots are the size that they are because I had to learn the hard way to make them that size because they would get eaten out in a normal. I guess if we ever have a normal winter, as far as some snow and some cold temperatures.
Okay.
This year it just didn't happen.
Yep. Last question, I think. What do you anticipate next year? I mean, I know, in both your guys' regions, was that 4 or 5 years ago, got hit fairly hard?
With the HD.
And it seems like it's been climbing back. Do you expect next year?
I did not. I've only heard of 1 or 2 guys that ever found a deer. I did not hear of VHD this year.
I think we found one dead deer on one farm and one on another. Yeah. But, I mean, not mass numbers like in the past.
Is the young class, I say young, the deer that were on the edge of what you guys would call shooters, were they better than they have been in years past? Like, are you excited about next year, or do you think it's going to be kind of more of the same?
I think our age classes might be getting a little bit better. We lost an entire age class of deer, the last big die-off. And I'm noticing that age class is starting to come back. Will it ever get back to what it was? More than likely not. But what I saw this year and talking to other guys, I think it's going in the right direction. And they just posted the numbers. We had a record bow harvest this year. And I don't remember the exact number. I shouldn't even say a number because I don't remember exactly the number, but I want to say it was close to 70,000 deer were shot with a bow. Now, that's also including the crossbows.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're combining that number now. So that's still, that's an unbelievable archery season for Illinois.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm anxious to see with the mild winter that we're having so far. I mean, knock on wood.
Right.
I think that's going to definitely help with, the herd health as they go in.
One thing that
less
bothers me
stress
or
on them.
concerns me is the lack of moisture. When we have lack of moisture, all the lakes are down. I mean, not just a few inches; they're down a couple feet.
Mm-hmm.
We need to, and I don't want a wet spring, but we need to get some snow and a little bit of moisture because that could turn into a good recipe for AHD.
Right. Yeah, I don't want to, say anything until we kind of see what happens with the rest of this winter and what
Right.
summer looks like going into it to know what the herd health is going to be going into this next season. But I like the genetics that are starting to come through on our younger ones, our 2 and 3 year olds. I saw a lot of stud 2-3 year olds that kind of make you second look at them, thinking like, oh, wow. And I saw a significant amount of those, especially on our Fulton County farms this year. There was a lot of really good ones, and we really didn't hunt the Fairview farm very much this year, just because there were so many young ones. We just kind of let them get comfortable out there, and that has me excited, I guess, for this upcoming season.
Well, cool. Okay, guys. Well, that wraps it up. That will be the final episode of the 2020 into 21 year-round whitetail hunter. We hope you enjoyed it, and I'm sure we'll come up with another series to throw at you next year. So thanks for listening.